The past, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, here receive and uphold it, vow to fathom that it has true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. Currently, we are talking about the 25 disciples of the Buddha and their stories of attaining realization. By relying on different causes and conditions, they had attained realization. Previously, we had already covered the causes and conditions, including 5 roots, the 6 objects, and the 6 consciousness, and then the 7 great elements. You can call it as 4 great elements, 5 great elements, but over here it talks about the 7 great elements. That is fine as well. We have already completed the 5 roots, 6 objects, and 6 consciousness, and now within the 7 great elements, we've completed the water element, the fire element. Now, out of the 7, there's the earth, water, fire, wind, emptiness, and then consciousness, and as well as view. The great masters that we are talking about right now, in fact, they are the bodhisattvas, though they are referred to as great arhats, but in fact they are the ones that had already attained the bodhisattvas bhumis. In the 10 bhumis of the Mahayana Bodhisattvas, we can see that's their level of realization. Now let's look at the disciples that attained realization through relying on the elements. Let's look at the 20th one out of 25. The 20th one's name is called the pure youth, the moonlight. So he is a pure youth. It is similar to how we would refer to Manjushri as a youth. The pure youth moonlight arose from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to the Buddha, I remember that a long time ago, beyond kalpas, as many as there are sands in the Ganges River, there was a Buddha in the world named the Water God. The moonlight, the pure youth moonlight, after prostrated to the Buddha, then addressed to the Buddha by saying that I remember in the past for many kalpas, there was one particular Buddha during a kalpa, and this Buddha's name is Water God. I think within the 35 Buddhas, there is also the name of Water God Buddha. And then he continued to say that who taught all the bodhisattvas to cultivate the contemplation of water and enter samadhi. I reflected upon how throughout the body, the essence of water is not in discord. I started with mucus and saliva and went on through digestive juices, phlegm, semen, blood to urine and excrement. In fact, when the Buddha would give teachings, sometimes the disciples would practice upon the water, sometimes on fire, sometimes on the impurity, or reflect up on the repulsiveness of the body, and sometimes on wind, sometimes on space, and sometimes visualize the Guru. So there are different methods of practicing visualization, including in the Mahayana practice. Sometimes we would make observation of the sound of water and sometimes sound of fire. and there are the 4 great yogas that includes those kinds of practices. Over here, this bodhisattva was required to practice up on the water so that he can enter into samadhi. This time, I think we have indeed learned that it's crucial to recognize that there are a variety of different practices. For such reason, we should not slander any other schools or any other practices. Do not think that, oh, it is only that the Mahayana is the most supreme, so everyone else should do that. In fact, you should rejoice whatever other kinds of practices are out there for other people to practice. Otherwise, it's quite narrow-minded. Also, if you were to slander that particular teaching, then that is slandering the Dharma. So at the time of contemplating up on the nature of water, he noticed that the essence of water is not in discord. So they are not really in conflict with one another. From the water essence from the nose, that is the mucus, and then from mouth, the saliva, or the semen and blood from the body, or urine and excrement, those that belongs to the part upholds the nature of water or elements of water, they then come from the body, and then also it revolves through the body. Some of those water elements may be more clear, some may be much more murky, and some thick, some thin. Some are considered more cleaner, some less. But the nature of water is identical, is exactly the same. From the nature aspect of water, they're all the same. And then he continued to say that I saw that the water in my body was not at all different from that in the world outside. Even that in royal lands of floating banners with all their seas of fragrant waters. Whatever kinds of water that we see on the outside, on the external world, the rivers, the ocean, and the creeks, even all the way to the Avatamsaka world, the fragrant ocean, the water from the fragrant ocean, or the fragrant ocean within Sukhavati, or those kinds of fragrant ocean within different Tathagatas. In fact, the nature is the same. They're all liquid. At that time, when I first succeeded in the contemplation of water, I could see only water. I still had not gotten beyond my physical body. At first, after he contemplated in such a way, he saw that everything is of the nature of water. When we study Abhidharma or Yogacara Shastra, at the time of contemplation, the practitioner may perceive everything to be part of the water element. And then even included in the Theravada tradition, some of the practices would result in such kinds of vision as well. After succeeding in the practice of viewing everything as water, they see that the inner world, the outer world, including his body and external world, there are nothing else but water elements. But at that time, it is still not the ultimate vision of emptiness. It is still not to the realization that the body is empty yet. They would hold on to how the body is pervaded with water, and same as the whole world is pervaded with water. So they still hold on to a substantial existence of water. there is no true realization or the ultimate realization of selflessness of self or selflessness of phenomena yet. And then he continued to say that I was a bhikshu then, and once when I was in Dhyana reposing in my room, a disciple of mine peeked into the window and saw only pure water there, which filled the entire room. He saw nothing else. At the time of this pure moonlight, pure youth of the moonlight was a bhikshu, and then he was practicing in retreat, and he was practicing up on the contemplation of water. At that time, he has a naughty disciple that peeked through the window, and at the time of peeking, he didn't see anything else other than water. The room has transformed into an ocean filled with water. There was a similar story of the disciple of Nagarjuna, whom practiced up on visualization of horns on her head. And then Nagarjuna at that time told his disciple, saying that you should practice in such a way that later other people would be able to see your horns as well. So she kept on practicing again and again until others would also be able to see her horns. And then the guru, Nagarjuna, kept on saying, then give her another instruction saying that you should not practice to make that horn empty, to let go of those horns. And then she did. So over here, it shows that the contemplation upon water is the same. He then continued to say that the lad was young and not knowing any better. He picked up a tile and tossed it into the water. It hit the water with a plunk. Well, the young lad was probably around 8 to 15 years. This kind of young lad was actually not knowing any better and rather quite naughty. And then he used a tile and threw it into that water. He probably thought to himself that, is that really water? Or is that something else? Is it some kind of illusion? Is it the sun days? Because he couldn't see any practitioners in that retreat hut, rather ocean. Then as a young child, naturally he picked up a little pebble or tile and then threw it into that body of water. And then he gazed around and then left. Maybe because he was afraid to be seen by the others, so he ran away. He continued to say that when I came out of the concentration, I was suddenly aware of a pain in my heart, and I felt like Shariputra must have felt like this when he met that cruel ghost. As we can see, some of those meditative experiences are indeed quite rare and extraordinary. Over here, he made the cross-reference to Shariputra when he encountered a cruel ghost during his meditation. According to Surangama Sutra, it says that Shariputra at Vulture Peak, at the time he entered into the Vajrayana Samadhi. The two servants or two attendants to one of the four heavenly kings was passing through that area. They were considered as devas, at the same time were pretas as well. So one of them at that time had the thought of harming Shariputra. He thought to himself, I really want to beat him up. Sometimes those non-humans are really quite strange. It is really out of no reason he wanted to harm Shariputra because Shariputra didn't do anything harmful to him. But maybe it is part of the habitual tendencies carried down from his mind stream. So he was not very happy that Shariputra was engaging in samadhi, but he wanted to harm Shariputra. While Shariputra was in samadhi, this preta punched Shariputra's head with great force. But then Shariputra did not move at all. And then the other attendant said that if you're beating him up while he's in meditation, I'm not going to stay here with you. And then this preta asked, are you afraid of him? Are you afraid of Shariputra? And the other attendant said, yes, I do. And then he left before the other attendant left. After the other attendant left, the ground opened up, and then this attendant that punched Shariputra's head fell into hell realm directly. And then when Shariputra came out of his samadhi, he felt this headache and he had no idea what happened. So he went to the Buddha, and the Buddha told him it was because of a punch from this preta ghost. Similarly, over here, this pure youth moonlight, after being thrown a little tile or a pebble, he felt this pain in his heart. And then he said that I thought to myself, I am already an arhat and have long since abandoned conditions that bring on illness. Why is it that today I suddenly have a pain in my heart? Being an arhat, he thought he had already long abandoned the conditions that brings on illness. But what happened? Why do I have a pain in my heart? Am I about to lose the position of a non-retreat or a non-returner? Am I going to lose my fruition of being an arhat? And just then, the young lad came promptly to me and related what had happened. I quickly said to him, when you see the water again, you may open the door, wade into the water, and remove the tile. So this naughty child told the pure youth moonlight, saying that, oh, I found a pebble because I saw that your room was filled with water, and then I throw it in. So the child then told this Bodhisattva moonlight what had happened. The child was obedient, so when I returned samadhi, he again saw the water and the tile as well. He opened the door and took it out. When I came out of concentration, my body was as it had been before. In fact, I prefer the way that I give teachings on the Sutra of the Baskets display, because if I were to read the ancient Chinese translation, it is a bit slower. It takes me more time. But if I were to simply do a side translation, it's actually easier for me, and you don't have to feel that I am too slow in reading. Anyhow, over here, he says that the pure youth moonlight says that, well, if next time you were to see me to transform me into water again, or you see me as water again, then you better open the door and come in, and then take the tile away. Then at the time the young lad saw he had transformed into water, or saw the water in his retreat place after he entered into samadhi, he then listened to his teacher instead of throwing another tile or another pebble in it. After that pebble has been taken out, his body then recovered. According to the commentary, as well as some other stories, says that at the time of contemplating up on fire, the whole mountain can be burning. And some of the great masters at the time of contemplating up on space, the whole world can transform into space. And if one were to accomplish the four great yogas, then one would not be harmed by any of the elements. For example, Milarepa's biography states that Milarepa does not get harmed by the burning of fire, nor the flood of water, nor to throw him down from the cliff. The reason is because he had accomplished the 4 great yogas and he had attained a great freedom. To continue, he said that he encountered limitless Buddhas and cultivated in this way until the coming of the thus come one, king of masterful penetrations of mountains and seas. Then I finally had no body. My nature and seas of fragrant water throughout the 10 directions were identical with the true emptiness without any duality or differences. It is only he encountered this particular Buddha, the Buddha, king of masterful penetration of mountains and seas, he finally attained no body. This particular Tathagata is quite marvelous. He can transform what was existent to not existent and vice versa, also big into small and from infinite to one and one to infinite as well. The pure youth Moonlight continued to say that then I finally had no body. My nature and the seas of fragrant water through the 10 directions were identical to the true emptiness without any duality or differences. In fact, at that time, he finally obtained the nature of water is of emptiness. It is of no duality and no differences. At that time, he attained realization through the nature of water. It is like this. For example, you have a cup of water, a drop of water, and the nature of water within your body and outside of the body. The nature of water has not changed, and the nature of water is not truly existent either. When we look at a drop of water, for example, emptiness is form and form is emptiness. If you can make such observation, and with such a powerful observation, the nature of water is not existent either. That is the practice. So the water would transform into water and water to emptiness, and then emptiness becomes the non-duality of the luminosity and emptiness of the Tathagata, and that's the realization. And then he continued to say that now I am with the thus come one, and I'm known as a pure youth, and I have joined the assembly of bodhisattvas. If the Buddha were to ask me about perfect penetration, what the perfect penetration is, by means of the nature of water, I penetrated through the flow of a single flavor, and I obtained patience with the non-production of Dharma and the perfection of Bodhi. This is the foremost method. So he pointed out, this is how I attained the perfect Bodhi, and that is why the water element is the perfect penetration. So he has a deep feeling towards the element of water. I'm not sure if the bodhisattvas have the kind of feelings that mundane beings have. But I can say that Phuntsog Rinpoche has lots of feelings to the direct pointing out composed by Mipa Rinpoche. He used this lapis lazuli blue paper and transcribed and copied the pace instruction of Tractro with gold. And he kept it in his in front of him at all times. So sometimes we probably would think that the great masters have no grasping whatsoever, but in their manifestation to us, in fact, they do have lots of feelings and graspings and kindness, and they do miss their teacher, and they hold on to the Dharma teachings, and they definitely have those feelings too. So I think many of you, if you were to attain realization in Larungar, you would not forget about Larungar. You would not forget about the water and mountain and the space, as well as the grass and shrubberies and trees. You would not forget about here at all. To me, whenever I even think of the name Larungar, I would feel very differently about, I would generate a different feeling. I would have a different feeling. And if there is no blessings, there would be no feeling to it. Similarly, if you have received some precious teachings from certain Khenpos and Khenmos, then wherever you go, wherever you are, you would constantly remember that person with gratitude. Or vice versa, you would probably feel that, oh, that person definitely didn't help me out and I really want to punch him or her. So we can see that the causes and conditions for each of the sentient beings can be very different. Anyhow, let's look at the 21st disciple that attained realization. The Dharma prince, Vajrayana light arose from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to the Buddha, I can still remember back through aeons as many as the sands in the Ganges River to the time of a Buddha named Limitless Sound, who instructed the bodhisattvas that fundamental enlightenment is wonderful and bright. After the Vajrayana light, this Dharma prince rose from his seat, he bowed at the Buddha's feet, and then said that he remembers that there was a Buddha whose name was Limitless Sound. Now, this sound has a lot to do with wind, the wind element. We know that without wind, we would not be able to hear any sound. The sound would not be blown into our ears. So, the limitless sound also indicates that this is related to the wind element. And then he continued to say that the Buddha then taught them to contemplate this world and all the beings in it as false conditions, propelled by the power of wind. This Buddha, at the time of teaching the retinues, taught all the bodhisattvas, saying that whatever it may be, the phenomena or the body of the sentient beings, they are simply false. They are simply causes and conditions that people falsely grasp onto. And sometimes, in our terms, we would call it the primordial movement of ignorance. Because of such kinds of movement, then the whole world, the phenomenal world, the animated world and the inanimate world would then manifest. This is taught in the treasury of the wish-fulfilling treasury. It talks about how out of the fundamental ground there is the manifestation, and then that's the first ignorance that manifests, and then it continues to unfold outwardly and unfold inwardly. In this way, if it unfolds outwardly, it becomes the phenomenal world, and if it inwardly, then it is the animate world. For example, the afflictions, and then the conceptual thoughts, as well as the mind, and so on. All of those would simply manifest. Now, because of these false conditions, everything simply rely on the power of wind. As the Bodhisattva said, that everything is based on the wind. Lots of the worldly scholars, for example, if they were to study wind, they would just talk about only wind. But the Buddha, not only he would give teachings on the wind element, he talked about the pith instruction that the disciples can attain realization through relying on this element. Indeed, I feel that Surangama Sutra is really wonderful. I think nowadays we have lots of dualistic thoughts, and the Westerners really enjoy logic and those kinds of teachings. If you can give them teachings based on Surangama Sutra, they would have to agree with the teachings of the Buddha. In whichever state of the circumstances of an era, we have to use ways that the sentient beings can accept so that they can start treading on the path of the Dharma. But of course, you have to have You have to develop sharp wisdom. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand the words and the meaning. And then people would get drowsy and they don't want to listen to it anymore. Just like in the parliament, sometimes if the speaker is not giving good teaching, or if they're not giving good speech, then people sitting there would not agree with them. You do need wisdom, some wisdom. If you have some wisdom, well, I don't want to be too extensive at the very beginning because we have lots to cover. He continued to say that I then understood that the nature of movement does not come from anywhere and does not go anywhere. Every single material particle throughout the 10 directions and every upside down living beings in it is of the same anti-falseness. He started contemplating up on the phenomenal world from the 10 directions, and he made this observation of this phenomenal world, and they are all correlated to the movement of wind. And then in terms of time, they are also of a movement. He then started looking back into his own body, the front, the back, the walking, the abiding, sitting, and laying down. Each and every movement of the body, let it be movement or in stillness, they are all related to wind. Including whenever it comes to our mind, each of the arising and abiding and change and cessation, the changes of the movements of mind has correlation to wind as well. At the time of making those observations, when it comes to the nature of all of such, they are no other than wind. Whatever kinds of movements there may be, there is nothing to be obtained. There is no entity and something substantial to be obtained. So they are of no other than movement. The phenomenal world, the animated and inanimated worlds, all the movements of the mind and thoughts, they are of emptiness. So he attained realization through the wind element, because it states that the movements doesn't have any entity. The movements of mind, body, and world, there is no entity to it, so they're of emptiness. And then he said that all kinds of movements in its nature doesn't have any going or coming. There is no place for it to go, and there is no place for it to come from. So the worlds of the 10 directions or the sentient beings that's deluded, they are in fact all false, all illusories. So when you truly make this observation and contemplation, there is nothing intrinsically existent. They are all in movement. The animating, inanimate worlds are of movement, and same as us, same as our minds and body and speech and whatever it may be. They are in movements, and such movements in nature is false, and the nature is false, and they're not truly existent at all. And then he continued to say that, and so throughout the 3,000 great thousand worlds, the living beings in each of the worlds were like so many mosquitoes confined in a trap and drowning monotonously. Caught in those few square inches, their hum built to a maddening crescendo. Whatever sentient beings there may be in the 3,000-fold worlds, 3,000 great thousand world, all the sentient beings are like hundreds of thousands of kinds of mosquitoes confined in a very small container. And they kept on fighting, kept on humming, kept on moving a lot. It is very similar. Sometimes I think it is very similar to the description of our world, and we can see the world from this perspective. All the different worlds in the country, in our world, all the countries in our world, Russia's here, and United States here, and United Kingdoms, and over there, and then there's North Korea and Japan and Korean and so on and so forth. All kinds of different mosquitoes kept on humming and having all kinds of arguments and fighting and having different conflicts, but they are of interdependence. They need to rely on one another, but most of the time they relate to one another with aggression, and the kinds of relation they have is of movement. Sometimes we can see that sentient beings are indeed so poor. People do not even have the opportunity to attain personal liberation at all if they were to continue to live in such a way. And now we see all kinds of movements in the world, the warfare and all kinds of schisms that's going on. There's the movement of the mind and movement of the body, and then the movement of the situations throughout which we encounter all kinds of suffering. But if you were to know the nature of movement, then that would be a very different story. We would be able to attain realization just like this Dharma Prince. And then he continued to say that not long after I encountered the Buddha, I attained patience with the non-production of dharmas. At the time of attaining the patience and endurance of non-rising, he said that my mind then opened, and I could see the country of the Buddha unmoving in the east. This is the Buddha land called unmoving in the east. I became a Dharma Prince and served the Buddhas of the 10 directions. My body and mind emit a light that makes them completely clear and translucent. My light is completely pervasive and without any obstruction. This light is not necessarily the light that we see. Rather, it is the light of wisdom that is without any obscuration. So he would be able to see the all-pervasive Dharma Dhatu and the nature of all phenomena. Once he had already penetrated the nature of all, then he would be able to emit that light of wisdom. That's what it meant here. And then the Buddha asked about perfect penetration. I contemplate the power of wind as lacking anything to rely on, and I awakened to the Bodhi-mind. When we went to India, Phuntsog Rinpoche, by relying on the power of wind, he heard the praises and supplication to Manjushri, and then he asked us to chant that. So as practitioners, especially within the Mahayana practices, there are the practices of making observation of the sound of wind. Or if you don't have a good house and you have winds coming through your various windows, that's probably even better. Or coming through various places of your huts, that's probably even better. You could attain realization through listening to the movements of wind. And in the winter, I'm sure you would be able to hear lots of wind over here. And then you can contemplate up on how there is no support and no entity, there's no coming, no going, and then you would be able to attain the true realization of a bodhicitta and enter into the samadhi that is without movement. And then he said that I entered the samadhi and meshed with the single wonderful mind transmitted to all the Buddhas of the 10 directions. This is the foremost method. On one hand, I feel that indeed this sutra expounds in such a great detail about the 6 roots, 6 consciousness, 6 objects, and the 7 great elements. Each of those had been expounded in such great detail, and it talks about the nature and the function, as well as the logic behind each of them. And then there's the explanation of how each of the great disciples attained realization, and each of the disciples shared their experience, personal experience of enlightenment to us. For such reason, if you have a good practice and supplicate to the Guru and the 3 jewels, then the causes and conditions of practice is really everywhere. We relate to the 4 elements every day: water, fire, earth, and wind. And we use our ears, eyes, nose, tongue, and body every day, and we can perceive the objects accordingly, the objects of the ear, eye, nose, tongue, and so forth, so on and so forth. So the practice is really now. And whatever kinds of practitioner you are, the Vajrayana or the Zen, it is now that you should engage in practice, and it is now that you should come to realization. At the moment of now, all of the nature of phenomena can appear. The true nature of it can be realized. The great masters of the past also relied on the various causes and conditions, just like the disciples of the Buddha, and they had attained realization, and some of them also obtained pithy instructions from their teachers. It is only that the causes and conditions sometimes would vary from the ones from the 25 disciples. Now let's look at the 22nd, the treasury of emptiness. Akshagarbha Bodhisattva arose from his seat, bowed to the Buddha's feet, and said to the Buddha, "The thus come one, and I attained boundless bodies at the place of the Buddha Samadhi light. At that time, I held in my hands 4 huge precious pearls." We Zhishang on the Buddha lands as many as the motes of dust in the 10 directions and transformed them into emptiness. So over here, Akshagarbha Bodhisattva says that the thus come one and I attained boundless bodies. The thus come one may refer to Shakyamuni Buddha. So both Shakyamuni Buddha and the treasury of emptiness Bodhisattva attained boundless bodies at the place of the Buddha Samadhi light. In other sutras, it says that the treasury of emptiness Bodhisattva has the body that is emptiness, or that is space. The treasury of emptiness Bodhisattva attained the realization that the body is no other than emptiness, no other than space. It is boundless. So the boundless bodies is no other than space. That's his realization. Now we have boundaries to our bodies. We have a head and we have feet, and then that's the length of our body. And then we feel that there is inside and outside of our body, there is such boundaries. But the Bodhisattva treasure of empty space knows that emptiness is a body. At that time, he held 4 huge precious pearls, which shone on Buddha lands as many as the motes of dust in the 10 directions, and transformed them into emptiness. The 4 great jewels, or 4 precious pearls, are implements, because The four elements are empty, and then the fifth element is space. According to Master Zhao Gong, he said that it is of emptiness of self, emptiness of Dharma, emptiness of both, which is true emptiness. So he explained it as four emptiness. And then some states that emptiness is also a sign to show that it could illuminate the world of 10 directions, because it is accumulated or piled by motes of dust. Everything that has a form are in fact space or is in fact emptiness. And sometimes it is a sign to demonstrate that the four great elements are emptiness. This is the wisdom. So such kind of wisdom would illuminate the world, and the whole world would become empty. Last year we had studied this, especially when it comes to the part of attaining realization of emptiness. It would be the best to supplicate to Akshagarbha Bodhisattva. The Mahayana practitioners and the Mahayana lineage masters, I think they are very much related to Akshagarbha Bodhisattva, because they often would point to space, to contemplate up on the space or look into space. Space is definitely really important to the Ati practitioners. And then there is the inner emptiness and outer emptiness. It is said that through our channels, and we would be able to contemplate upon the inner space. And within Mahayana, there is also the sacred emptiness that is within our mind. It is the primordial awareness that is also called the emptiness. So there's the outer, inner, and sacred emptiness. There are lots of pith instructions given about that. He continued to say that in my mind there appeared a great perfect mirror which emitted from within 10 kinds of subtle, wonderful, precious light that poured out into the 10 directions to the farthest bounds of emptiness. Now, why 10? Some says that 10 refers to the 10 kinds of strength associated to the Buddha. And Akshagarbha Bodhisattva says that his mind appears to be or manifest to be the great mirror wisdom, which is the eighth consciousness that then transforms into the great mirror wisdom. And then the 10 kinds of strength, 10 kinds of wisdom's light would shine forth, would emit, and then emit to the 10 directions of the farthest bounds of emptiness. All the royal lands of banners came into the mirror and passed into my body. There was no hindrance to this interaction, because my body was like emptiness. My body could enter with ease as many countries as there are fine motes of dust, and could do the Buddha's work on a wide scale, because it had become completely compliant to make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as well as serving the sentient beings. Those are the Buddha's works. After the practice of the body being emptiness has been completely compliant, then the Buddha's works, which is like a dream and as an illusion, can be of great vastness, especially when it comes to benefiting sentient beings. And then he continued to say that I achieved this great spiritual power from contemplating in detail how the four elements lack anything to return to. With the great spiritual power and with the detailed observation, the four elements is no other than space. All of the dualistic thoughts, the production and extinction that's associated to the animated and inanimate world is of no other than space. It is of the same with the Buddhahood, and the purity aspect is no other than the pure land and space. the impurity aspect, such as the 5 aggregates, the 18 dhatus, and so on, are no other than space either. He then continued to say that once I realized this identity, I obtained patience with the non-production of dharmas. So Akshagarbha Bodhisattva, with his vast practice of space, his wisdom enters into space, and the space enters into himself as well. So his body and space is no other. When he made the observation of non-duality, this is how he attained realization. At times in Vajrayana practice, sometimes we would practice, for example, toga practice, as well as staring into space, and take such space and emptiness as our body and our mind, and so on. All of these kinds of practice should be practiced with abiding, without any grasping, and it has something to do with the Dharma of non-production as well. The Buddha then he continued to say that if the Buddha were to ask about the perfect penetration, I used the contemplation of boundless space to enter samadhi and attained wonderful power and perfect clarity. This is the foremost method. Akshagarbha Bodhisattva says that for me, space is the foremost method. And then we will look at Maitreya Bodhisattva. Now we've finished the 5 elements. Now let's look at the consciousness and then seeing element. Now this is the 24th. Maitreya Bodhisattva then arose from his seat, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and said to the Buddha, I remembered when, as many kalpas ago as there are 5 motes of dust, a Buddha named the light of sun, moon, and lamp appeared in the world. Maitreya Bodhisattva after bowed at the Buddha and then said that, I remember that many kalpas ago there was a Buddha whose name was the light of sun, moon, and lamp. When he appeared in the world, under that Buddha I left home life, yet I was deeply committed to worldly fame and liked to fraternize with people of good family. So he said that I had the fortune to renounce family life. However, I still grasp onto fame and the benefits of this world. Especially, I really liked to fraternize with people of good family. I liked to make friends and make affiliations with people from the royal family or from the wealthy family, the ones with status as well as wealth. After we have already left a home life, after we have already took the monastic vow, unless it is to benefit sentient beings, sometimes we would affiliate ourselves with the ones that's wealthy and have status, but we should not seek for affiliation with people with status or wealth for our own benefits. In the Lotus Sutra, there was particularly a person whose name is seeking for fame. Look at Maitreya Bodhisattva. He now is the next Buddha to come, and we can see that when he was in the causal stage, he was still seeking for wealth and fame. He still had such kind of mind and intention. He was that kind of person back then. And then he continued to say that, then the world-honored one taught me to cultivate a conscious-only concentration, and I entered that samadhi for many aeons. I have made use of that samadhi as a performed deeds for many Buddhas, as there are sands in the Ganges. The Buddha of Sun Moon Light Buddha, he taught me to let go of everything in this world, and everything is simply conscious only, and everything is made by mind. This teaching is very similar to mind-only school. According to many sutras, it says that everything is made by mind. So let go of all your graspings to fame and benefits and all of those chores. All you need to do is simply look at your own mind. That's it. So he entered into this samadhi, and for many aeons and for a long period of time, he abided in this samadhi. For such reason, he performed deeds for as many Buddhas as there are sands in the Ganges. My seeking for worldly name and fame ceased completely and never reoccurred. When we look at the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' stories of attaining realization, we can see that it takes them a long period of time also to practice, and they would delve into this one particular practice for a long period of time so that they can attain realization. Unlike some of you would come to Larungar and after a few days or a few months, and you would start to say that I've been here for a long time. Why is it that I haven't attained realization? I'm really in a rush to attain realization. Look at Maitreya Bodhisattva as well as Savarnivarana Vishkambin or Akshagarbha Bodhisattva. In their previous lives, they spent a long period of time and they would accumulate little by little for as long as there are sands in Ganges rivers, so that they can attain realization. It is really not one lifetime. It is not that simple, because in our mind stream, there's so much deep-rooted habitual tendencies, and we have to clear all of those. We have to pacify all of those, so that our mind can truly tread into the right path and truly understand the correct teaching. It is really not that easy. It is not to say that I've been here for so long, I haven't even had a good dream, I haven't even had a dream of the deity yet. In fact, if you were to think all kinds of things during the day, then it is difficult to dream of gurus and deities at night. Maitreya Bodhisattva over here said that after being in that samadhi for many aeons and then used that samadhi to perform deeds for many Buddhas, and then his seek for worldly name and fame ceased completely and never reoccurred. Then he said that when the burning lamp Buddha appeared in the world, I finally accomplished the unsurpassed, wonderful, perfect samadhi of consciousness. It is only at the time when the burning lamp Buddha appeared in the world, he finally accomplished the samadhi of consciousness, that everything is unsurpassed and is wonderful, and everything is simply of mind. It is only after a very long period of time he attained realization. I went on until to the ends of emptiness, all the lands of the thus come one, whether pure or defiled, existent or non-existent, were transformations appearing from within my own mind. Everything within emptiness, everything within space, all lands of the thus come one, all the pure and defiled, all the noble ones as well as the mundane ones, in some of the pure lands, in fact, some of the pure lands have both pure and defiled. Some has only pure, some has only defiled, and some has only the noble ones, some has both noble ones and the mundane ones. Whatever the case may be, he knows that they are simply manifestation, appearing from within his own mind. If the mind is pure, then the land is pure. If the mind is defiled, the land is defiled. If our world, in fact, all of our world that we perceive are no other than the reflection from our mind, of our mind. It is just like in a dream. If your health is not well, then your mind is not well. Sometimes if you dream, your dream, sometimes sometimes when you dream during illness, then your dreams are all quite chaotic and very diluted. And when your mind is pure, then your dream can be very pure too. And then he said that, world honored one, because I understand consciousness only thus. The nature of consciousness revealed limitless, thus come once. Now I have received the prediction that I will be the next to take the Buddha's place. Maybe Maitreya received the prediction from Shakyamuni Buddha that he will be the next Buddha. Look at the disciples of Maitreya, such as Sangha. He propagated the teaching of mind-only school, maybe for such reason, because all the way back till the Shakyamuni Buddha's time, and Maitreya Bodhisattva shared his enlightenment story. So we can see that the Yogacara Shastra, where it expounds a lot of the mind-only school's teaching, or from that mind-only perspective, is very much correlated to how Maitreya Bodhisattva attained realization, and then his disciple being a Sangha, and then continue to propagate this teaching. And then he continued to say that the Buddha asked about a perfect penetration. I was intent upon the contemplation that the 10 directions come only from consciousness. When the conscious mind is perfect and bright, one enters the perfection of the real. One leaves behind reliance on others and attachment to incense, calculating, and attains the patience with non-production of dharmas. This is the foremost method. Over here, the perfection of the real is the perfect nature. And then in the 3 key terms within mind-only school is the perfect nature, imagined phenomena, and dependent phenomena. This is the first time we hear the term perfection of the real, or perfect nature. Now, to Maitreya Bodhisattva, the most important method of practice is mind, and the mind that creates everything. For such reason, Maitreya Bodhisattva, at the time of turning the Dharma wheel, when it's his turn to be a Buddha, to be the Buddha, then he would definitely give the teaching from the habitual tendency from the mind-only school. At the time when we studied the ornaments of the middle way, Mipa Rinpoche also said that as a Mahayana practitioner, we have to study both mind-only school and middle way school, and we should study it together. This is probably one of the reasons. Now, let's look at the 24th disciple, which relied on the seeing, or the view, to attain realization. In the sutra, it says, the Dharma Prince of great strength, together with 52 bodhisattvas of similar rank, arose from his seat. So together with his classmates, they all arose and then bowed at the Buddha's feet and said to the Buddha, I remember when, as many aeons ago, as there are sands in Ganges River, a Buddha called Limitless Light appeared in the world. He said he remembered that there was a Buddha whose name is Limitless Light. In that kalpa, in that same aeon, there were 12 successive thus come once. The last was called Light Surpassing the Sun and Moon. That Buddha taught me the Buddha recitation Samadhi. The last Buddha of that aeon, his name is Light Surpassing the Sun and Moon Buddha. According to some commentaries, some said that the Limitless Life Sutra includes 13 names of limitless light. And another name is Light Surpassing Sun and Moon Buddha. There are 11 names. That is why some said that there are 11 Buddha's names. There are 11 Buddhas. And some said that though the names are the same, the Buddhas are different. then that is to say there are 12 Tathagatas at the time of limitless light Buddha. And the last Buddha is the light surpassing sun and moon. There are different ways of explaining it according to Master Jiaguan and other masters in their commentaries. So if that's the last Buddha, then they must be different Buddhas. Maybe it's just because if they were to be the same Buddha, then they would say that it is the same Buddha with different names and names such as so on and so forth. So it is probably a different Buddha. Over here, the Buddha recitation Samadhi. In fact, at the times when the great masters from the Pure Land school often talk about the Buddha recitation Samadhi or Buddha name recitation Samadhi, sometimes they would say to chant the name Amitabha and then chant it with your mouth, with your mind, and follow the meaning of the Amitabha. At the time of chanting the Buddha's name with your mouth, you should also follow the mind. You should also follow the letter or the words, so that your mind would contemplate upon it. That is called recitation of the Buddha's names. In the Chinese character, the word recitation has a character of mind underneath, so it is very much related to mind. That is to say that you need to chant it with your mouth, with your mind as well. And then there are two examples given. The first one is that suppose that there were a person who always remembers someone else, but someone else he remembers has entirely forgotten about him. If two such people were to meet, even if they were to see each other, they would not take notice, they would not recognize each other. It is to say that two people, one has rather very good memory, but the other one very easy to forget entirely. If these two people meeting each other or not, if both of them can try their best to remember each other, the one that has a good memory try to remember the other one, and the one doesn't have a good memory try harder to remember the other person. In this way, these two can be together, just as how a person will be followed by his shadow, and one would not part from the other one. And then he continued to give the example by saying that this person that has very good memory is the Buddha. The one that doesn't have good memory is us, the sentient beings. As sentient beings, if we do not chant the name of a Buddha, then though the Buddha would be following you at all times, but if you don't remember him, then you would not have the opportunity to recognize him. This is the first example. The second one says that out of pity for living beings, the thus come ones of the 10 directions are mindful of them as a mother remembering her child. If the child runs away, of what use is the mother's regard? But if the child remembers his mother in the same way that the mother remembers the child, then in life after life, the mother and child will not be far apart. If the mother remembers the child, but if the child does not remember the mother and would run away from the mother, doesn't matter how much the mother cares and remembers the child would not return. If the child also remembers the mother as how mother remembers the child, then the mother and child would be together for lifetimes and would not be far apart. This is the second example. The first one is the example of two people, and the second one is of mother and son. And then in the sutra it says that if living beings beings remember the Buddha, are mindful of the Buddha, certainly they will see the Buddha now or in the future. Now, the Buddha is just like our mother that has a good memory, also has great loving kindness to the child, just like the mother does. If the mother, since the mother really cares for the child, but if the child is really naughty and doesn't want to remember the mother, then there is really nothing that the mother can do. But if the child or if sentient beings can chant the name of the Buddha with their mouth, with their lips, and at the same time with their mind, and contemplate as well as visualize the Buddha, then they would definitely see the Buddha now or in the future. They will never be far from the Buddha, and their minds will awaken by themselves without the aid of expedience. So such a person, without even other methods, other kinds of skillful means, they would be able to be awakened. They would swiftly attain realization, attain awakenment. A person who has been near incense will carry a fragrance on his person, on his body. It is the same in this case. It is called an adornment of fragrant light. If a person were to sell incense for a living, this person would definitely be fused with fragrance. Similarly, if a person were to chant the name of the Buddha, then the blessings of the Buddha would definitely be infused in this person, and that is called the adornment of fragrant light. If we were to chant Om Mani Padme Hum every day, then we will be just like the one that's being infused with fragrance every day. We will carry such fragrance everywhere. So our familiarization is so important. If we do not familiarize ourselves with the name of the Buddha, if we do not really care for the names of the Buddha, or we do not respect the Buddha or the Guru or the Sangha, then the blessings of the three jewels would be very difficult for you to obtain. For such reason, it is essential for you to place diligence in familiarize yourself with this practice. I really feel that we have such a great connections to Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and then Amitabha. Lots of the teachings that we've studied this year, lots of the teachings that we received this year are very much connected to all the three bodhisattvas. So if you were to die this year, you would be fortunate because you would, since you have already made connections to the great bodhisattvas. Even so, I don't think any of you would like to part from this world yet. So here it says that the one that constantly practices the Buddha name recitation can be called the adornment of fragrant light. The great strength of Bodhisattva continue to say that on the causal stage, on the causal ground, I used the mindfulness of the Buddha to enter into patience with the non-production of dharmas. So he practiced in such a way that he contemplated upon Amitabha and chanted the name of Amitabha, and he entered into the non-production of dharma, into the patience with the non-production of dharmas. Now in this world, I gather in all those who are mindful of the Buddha and bring them back to the Pure Land. He's here to gather or tame or take those who also chant the name of the Buddha and bring them back to Pure Land. The Buddha asked me about perfect penetration. I would select none other than gathering the six organs through continuous pure mindfulness to obtain samadhi. If the Buddha were to ask me, I have really no other choice but to gather all the six organs through continuous pure mindfulness to obtain samadhi. This is the foremost method. wholeheartedly, one-heartedly, with one gate to enter into the name of the Buddha. Lots of the great masters of Pure Lands have many great numbers of pith instructions. We should chant the name of the Buddha, and if we do so, we would definitely think of the Buddha as well. And then if we can keep chanting, our mind would also keep remembering the Buddha. This is the recitation of Buddha name Samadhi. This is the most important view. That's the most important because it leads us to rebirth in Pure Land. Now we have completed this volume.
Chubum solen jova